Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. First off, we have two amazing guests with us, but we want to just give a big shout out and congratulations to all the current graduates this year and anyone who's earned their seal by literacy. You did it and we're so excited for you. So hopefully this interview is going to be something that is helpful for you to think about how you can use your language in the workforce. So first off, we have two amazing guests with me today that we're going to join in for an interview. We have Natalie Roberts. She's pursuing her master's in Asian studies with a focus in Inter-Asia, specifically looking at China and Southeast Asia. She's an East West Center student affiliate and Hawaii Language Roadmap Initiative's lead intern this academic year. She loves language, traveling, and eating delicious foods. Welcome, Nat.
Hi, guys.
And then we also have Carol Lee. She's a first year's master's degree student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, where she's studying Asian international affairs. Welcome, Carol.
Hi, everyone.
Cool. So guys, this is going to be an informal interview. Hopefully we can have some good conversation and talk about language. To start off, I would love to hear a little bit more about your language learning journey and what languages you're studying and speaking. So maybe Carol, would you want to start first?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I was just always interested in language, only because in my home, multiple language is spoken. So I grew up with Cantonese and Korean because of my parents coming from two different countries. And then I was also interested in learning French in high school. But I guess I really got serious when I entered university, when I started learning Mandarin. And I just had a really great relationship with my professors, and also got to travel to China. And now thinking about my own heritage and roots, I'm starting to also learn Korean.
Very cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think it's such a meaningful story and something that a lot of the viewers and listeners can relate to, of hearing language in their household and then continuing their language journey. Thanks. Nat, do you want to share a little bit about your language journey?
Yeah, I must admit, I'm always jealous when people have a different language in home. My home was just English speaking, but when I went off to school in kindergarten, the school that I went to actually offered languages right off the bat. So you either started on a Chinese year, Mandarin, or Spanish year. So the year I started school happened to be Mandarin, and I actually took it K through 12th grade. And I never would have thought that I would be taking it that long, that I would actually have an interest in it. And I remember in 5th grade, everyone was switching languages because that's when we entered middle school. And all of my friends were switching to Spanish. And I was like, I need to switch to Spanish. That's what the cool kids are doing. But my Chinese teacher actually called home and was like, no, Natalie can't switch to Spanish. Like, she's doing great in Chinese. This is something she should definitely continue. And so that's something that stuck with me definitely since then. And I did pick up Spanish along the way and actually did dual language study in high school. But it's definitely something that I want to continue in the future. And I definitely just have a love for language. No matter where I go, I try to pick up at least a few words.
I love that. Very cool. Yeah, and I think your story is just such a testament to how important language learning in schools is and how that can kind of carry with you through life. Thanks. Very cool. Well, now that we heard a little bit about your guys' personal journey in terms of your language learning, I would love to hear more about kind of how you've used your language in the different professional sphere, whether that's part-time jobs or maybe even your long-term career. Carol, do you want to go first?
Oh, sure. I think when you ask that question, the first thought that comes to my mind is just how much more connection you can make with people just because you're able to speak something that they understand. And I'm sure a lot of international students and people who are multilingual can speak English, but it's something very heartwarming when you're able to speak in something that they grew up with and are familiar with. So whether it was at my part-time job, I worked at a restaurant, Phuket Thai restaurant, and around Chinese New Year's, like people would come in and I would just tell them like, oh, Sanlin Fai Log or Xin Nian Kuai Le. You could just see on their face like, wow, that's really nice of you to say. And then they would tell me like, oh, have good health this year. And they would tell me and my manager, and then I would translate that to my manager, and my manager was also just really touched. So you can really create these like heartwarming connections, and I think that's been really valuable for me as even an English teacher abroad, or and other capacities. So I really think that connection has been really valuable.
Yeah, what I hear you saying and talking about is relationships. Just this week, I was hearing about a student's speech where the student was saying their world is as big as the languages they speak, right? And when we have different languages in that capacity, we're able to connect with more people and understand people's cultures and worlds even so much more. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And out of curiosity, kind of with your work in the restaurant, did you find, like, were you able to share that when you were through the hiring process, or is that something that was kind of just like a surprise bonus for your employers to find that you were able to use the language skills? I'm curious just a little bit to learn more about that.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I did put it on my resume, and I think my supervisor saw it as an asset, but didn't. It was just kind of like, oh wow, she's great at customer service and she can do this. Like that's great. And then, as you know, Hawaii has a lot of different Asian communities, and they would walk in, and it's just nice that I can at least speak a little, that they're a little bit more comfortable with me. So it became an even more cherry on top as I started working.
I love it. Very cool. Yes, it's a big plus. So thank you. And Nat, do you want to share a little bit more about how you've used language in your professional life?
Sure. So actually, in my undergrad career, I worked at the school cafeteria. Super exciting. But with all the international students that my school had, to piggyback off of Carol's point, just being able to say a few words to them in their own language made them exceedingly happy because they're so far away from home. And in that case, I wasn't necessarily hired because I had another language under my belt. But I remember managers commenting, being like, wow, that's so nice that you're able to talk to them, like, and able to tell them what type of foods that they're eating, because that's important, right? What if someone has an allergy? But actually, when I moved to Hawaii, I started retail, work at American Eagle at Ala Moana. And it was here that I realized, with the plethora of tourists and that sort of thing, how important it was that I was multilingual. And I did say it in my interview, and I did put it on my resume, but that's really the first time that I did that. Because before I was like, oh, it's not important, I'm not good enough, I shouldn't put that on there in case they ask me something and I won't be able to respond. But as I connect with guests on the floor and in the fitting room, they're always just shocked when I'm like, hey, do your pants fit right? It might seem trivial, but for them, it's something that really gives them the guest experience. And when, as a worker, I do feel really happy when I can help a guest in that way.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I thank you for sharing those kind of tidbits and those stories. Something I feel like both of you kind of highlighted is this kind of transition of like adding into your resume, talking about it in your interviews, but also like, when did you feel like you're quote unquote good enough to be able to start talking about it and highlighting it? Was there kind of a changing moment for you or a turning point?
Well, to jump in, I have to be honest. It happened randomly. I was actually on a trip to Thailand, and I was working on this service trip with orphans from Burma, actually, at the time. And we visited a refugee camp, and it actually had a ton of different types of people there. And there was an older Chinese lady, and they told us that she hadn't spoken to anyone in years. No one actually knew why she was there, but they let her stay because safety. And my group had a bunch of Chinese speakers, and we started speaking to her. And I was like, I'm not in class right now. I'm in Thailand. I don't know much Thai, but I'm speaking Chinese. And that's really when it clicked that I was like, I can do this. Like, I know Chinese. And so that's been the one thing that I always taken as my key moment, where I was like, I think I can do this. My language skills are good enough.
Wow, that's an awesome story, and that's really powerful. And it's just, I think, a good reminder of like using the language we have, whether it's we're fluent or we're proficient or we're still learning, is really important. And it's, again, though, going back to that connection and relationships, because that was probably really meaningful for that person. Carol, did you have any kind of similar experience or kind of a aha moment for you?
Yeah, I think mine kind of came into my head while Nat was talking. So thank you, Nat, for sparking memories for me. But I think I feel comfortable saying like, wow, I can actually like speak this language when I can bargain in the language, especially when I travel throughout Asia, whether it's like the ladies market in Hong Kong or the markets in Hongdae, and the shopkeepers. If I'm able to like quickly like react and throw out numbers to them and have this conversation and try to get a good deal, that's how I know like, okay, I think this is where my brain is in multilingual mode, where I don't have to like pause and think so long, where I can just, okay, yes, here, like boom, 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 boom. And that's how I feel a little bit more comfortable saying like, oh yeah, I can actually speak this.
Yes, and get the deal. That's super important. I love it. Very cool. Nice. Yeah, I think it's really always important to kind of hear what people's aha moment is, because I found with working with students who are language learners or are heritage speakers, there's these kind of two paradigms or two narratives I hear. One is like the fear of like I'll never be fluent enough, or like I'll never be good enough, and or there's the for language learners who are speaking at home being like, oh, I'm not sure if this is a place where I can use my language. Like they keep it kind of siloed in their home, and recognizing like, no, if you have the language skills, no matter whether it's you're here or here in terms of proficiency, it's like use it, connect with people. Like it goes way beyond the four walls of the classroom or the four walls of the home. So appreciate hearing that. Kind of to switch gears a little bit, I would love to hear more about your guys' academic pursuits. I know you're both studying for your master's in Asian studies at UH Manoa, and I would be curious to hear like how your language skills have kind of integrated into your academics and maybe even influenced your academic trajectory.
Well, for me, that's definitely been the case. So I'm inter-Asia focused Masters of Asian Studies student, and it's kind of a loaded deal there being inter-Asia because Asia's not small. But I chose to hone in on China, particularly because of the language, and I wanted to be able to use it for field research or use it in my future career path. And so it actually has been helpful if I'm looking at various sources. I can look in another language and be able to interpret what that means in English and how that can add to my argument in terms of my research. So that definitely did influence like which area I would focus on. But because I'm a comparativist, I like to look at several different countries. So if I know tidbits of something else, hopefully if I were to go on the field post-pandemic, I'd be able to communicate some way, somehow.
Yeah, thanks for that. Carol, do you want to share a little bit about your academics?
Yeah, absolutely. I think mine is very similar to Nat's, where honestly, if I didn't know any Korean, I think it'd be really difficult for me to do the research and the work that I do, because even though a lot of the articles that we read are in English primarily, written by scholars who do speak and write in English, when you're dealing with whether it's policy or bureaus or cultural facts, historical facts about another country, that's gonna like those like key events or key words are gonna be in that language. You might have like the romanization of it or the pinyin, but if you don't have that language background, it gets a little bit more difficult for you to really interpret what you're reading and understand like, oh, okay, this is like a key thing that happened in this country's history, or some type of policy that I should be aware of, or even just pronouncing like politicians' names correctly. So I think that's why my background in Korean and Chinese has been really helpful for me in my graduate school career.
Yeah, what a great insightful answer. When you were talking, it made me think about how we talk a lot about like cultural competency and cultural humility. And I think a key missing discussion or ingredient in that is like language skills. And like without the language skills, we really can't fully have a true understanding of a culture, or even like interact with that culture to a high proficiency. And with that language, you're enabling that and creating that, and whether it's interacting with politicians or reading from scholars or understanding those kind of key terms, that's really important. Thank you. And I would love to hear a little bit more about like, I guess, right, we're all graduate students right now, either like ending our first year or finishing up. What is kind of long-term plans, and do you see your language skills integrated with that? Nat, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely, like I said, after finishing high school and taking Chinese for that long, want to incorporate it into my future career. Um, I attempted to when I did teaching in Asia, but I actually ended up in Japan. So instead, I picked up some Japanese skills, realized that I didn't necessarily want to teach. So now that I'm nearing the end of my master's degree, I'm looking into foreign service, and that would definitely be an area where I feel like my language would be important in interacting with other folks from around the world, especially with my Mandarin capabilities. So I hope that it will be beneficial in the future. But as I move on to the summer, I'll still continue to use it in my retail position and hopefully in other bits and pieces in my life, because I honestly feel like Chinese is a part of my life now and language is not going anywhere.
Nice. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Carol, what about you?
Yeah, future. Ooh.
I know it's a
Um,
big question. I'm sorry.
no. You're. I think it's an important question too. I definitely want to go into diplomacy type of work, whether it's the foreign service, kind of similar to Nat, or kind of doing like East-West Center type of stuff and creating like educational and cultural programming. And I think having a multilingual background is very useful, especially when you have students that come from those countries, but also students who are just really interested in those countries, like all the students who are into K-pop right now. There's a common language with that. Or I really feel that even just knowing a little bit has helped me a lot. For example, I was in a group of other folks who are currently interning for the State Department. And one girl was talking about her experience in Korea. And she was like, there's this one grilled chicken dish with cheese on it. I don't know its name. And then I was like, oh, it's dakgalbi. And she was so grateful. She was like, I haven't heard of this dish in so long. And you like was able to name and articulate what it was that I ate. So just like little instances like that, I think make me realize like having a language background is really helpful. And when you can begin to have conversation and dialogue and even just emotional support, it's when you're working with students and other people, that's really important.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, thank you. And I think just in shifting gears one more time, I would love to hear maybe what is your advice for students who are kind of currently trying to leverage their language skills in the job market? Like you're both amazing, and I'm like so excited to see kind of as you use your language skills in your future. But for the students right now, do you have any advice?
Well,
Nat, do you want to start?
yeah, just continue to work on it. Like, even if you feel down about using your language, I've had my ups and downs. I've had to take strange hiatuses where I'm not using the language and get upset because I'm losing it. So just try to use it as much as possible. Talk to as many people as you can, no matter what realm you're in. I'm lucky to be in a community of East meets West. So I hear my Asian language a lot, but it's when I'm at the mall. It's when I'm at the grocery store. It's when I'm at Long's that I hear it and I'm like, wow, like this is why I continue to practice the language. And so I definitely think just you to use it and utilize it as much as you can and keep practicing even when it's hard. Self-study's crazy. It takes a lot of time and a lot of discipline. But if you can, even if it's like 30 minutes, 20 minutes a day, you'll feel a lot more confident, I feel like, in your skills, even if you're not in a classroom all the time.
Yeah, wise words. I appreciate that. Just even thinking about my own language journey, I was like, that is applicable and really important. So thanks. Carol, what about you?
Yeah, I think that I mean, Nat hit the nail on the head with a lot of that. And the only thing I would add is just kind of be kind to yourself throughout the process. I think, especially for me, kind of growing up with it, but kind of not growing up with it because we're, in schools and everywhere else in your life, it's English. So I think Matt was mentioning kind of this imposter syndrome where you feel like, oh, it's not good enough or it's not at this level. But just know that language learning is a lifelong process. you don't have to hit specific markers at a specific amount of time, unless if, that's something that you want to strive for. But I think just knowing you are amazing right now, like just the fact that you've come this far, and you can only go up from here, just always like remind yourself of that, because I think I would never have imagined myself at this point in my life right now being able to even speak and converse in this way. I don't think my parents imagined it either for me, but you are here and you should be extremely proud and just continue to treat yourself with kindness along the way.
Thank you both for those words. I think that's really inspiring and really important for students to hear. And I hope they take it in and continue with their language learning journey and see how it fits into their life, right? It's in the communities and things like that. And I guess kind of just in terms of our last question as a wrap up, why do you think having a multilingual workforce is so important for here in Hawaii, especially? Carol, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think going back to relationships, I think you can only do so much with English, but I think just knowing like our islands and the history and the diversity of people here, even if you speak any other language, it's so valuable. And you can connect with those who are older, you can connect those who are newly immigrated, you can connect with those who may speak at a different language at home. Like I think in our islands, this connection is so important. These relationships with one another and community with one another is so important here. And I think having the ability to speak in different languages and connect to other people this way continues to kind of cultivate what we have here in Hawaii.
Thank you. Yeah, I think building that connection and community is such the key of the Aloha spirit, and it's so important. Thanks. Nat, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, Carol definitely has the local perspective. I'm not from here, so for Minnesota alone, people don't realize that it's sort of a melting pot in itself. There's so many different languages that are spoken there, so many different groups of folks. So again, learning in kindergarten, I was like, why am I taking Chinese? What's the point of this? But it's been super useful. We have the Mall of America there, which is people flock to. And so it's been awesome to hear that just in like my daily life there. But bringing it to Hawaii was a totally different perspective. So many different Asian cultures coming together. And after living in Japan and seeing all the Japanese tourists here and the Japanese local culture, I realized how important it was that I had that background as well. But really, there's a ton of opportunities here in Hawaii alone to use your language, and just make sure you highlight that because it's needed, and people are always going to be happy to hear that you know their mother tongue.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your time and sharing your wisdom and your experiences. I hope for all our students listening that you continue using your language. It's such a gift and it's such a valuable part of your identities, and be proud of that and share it. And as kind of that was sharing, like it might be in the dressing room to tell people, hey, like that looks great on you, or like, do you need another size? Or as Carol was saying, like translating for employees or restaurants or customers. So you can use it in so many different varieties and settings, and it's helpful in a lot of different fields. So we hope you continue using, and congratulations again for everyone who's earned their seal. And for those who are listening, who are considering, we hope you start your journey. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.